guess we have to click.
Hello everyone, my name is Rowan Gulliver. I am the director for the Toronto International Festival of Authors. I'm delighted to welcome you to the fourth and final instalment of this first series of Downtime, a series of conversations in partnership with the Art Gallery of Ontario and the Toronto International Festival of Authors, where we've been in conversation with authors and artists about creativity in lockdown, how they found their ways and worked through looking for escapism, how they've read, how they've found their time and found their space. I'm delighted to introduce Adelina Vlas, who's a curator of contemporary art at the AGO. And today she'll be in conversation with artists Janet Cardiff and George Bures Miller, two Canadian artists who've had a global impact, presenting work across North America and Europe. Work that is built around sound and sound installations, and in particular audio walks. Night Walk in Edinburgh was being a recent highlight for me, and one that we've been talking about already. Their themes of narrative and storytelling makes them particularly apt for this series, but also their exploration of space and public space and how we navigate and inhabit those spaces has obviously changed a lot in the past few months for us. So it'll be interesting to get their thoughts on that now. Although this event is in the digital space, we are all rooted in place and history. And as a new arrival in Canada and as director of TIFA, I want to acknowledge that words and ideas have been shared here for thousands of years. I'd like to thank and acknowledge the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, who have occupied this land, cared for it, and are sharing it with all Torontonians. The land is also part of the Dish with One Spoon territory, a treaty to peaceably share and protect this land through friendship and respect. This land is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I'm grateful to be here and to have the opportunity to connect with you from my home to yours. And so, without further ado, enjoy the show.
Thank you, Rowan. Thank you for that introduction, and welcome everyone to this conversation. It's a real pleasure to have Janet and George join us today. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And I'm really excited to just see what you've been up to and how those past 3 months have been for you. And the first question is, where are you?
We're in British Columbia, in kind of a valley between mountains, in a town called Grinrod. Actually, we're not in the town, we're a couple miles out of town.
It's in the northern Okanagan.
Or the southern Shuswap.
But we live out on sort of a farm, I guess. We have a couple of horses, and we live right on the river, and it's surrounded by trees and things like that. So it's really in the middle of nowhere, but beautiful.
Yeah, so we've been quite fortunate to be here this is our main studio setup. So we have a couple of studios. This is our office play studio, music studio, and then we have another studio over about 100 meters away where we do most of our main installation work. And so basically this time has been pretty easy on us because we've just been doing mainly what we normally do, go to the studio.
Yeah, actually it hasn't changed that much except for our flying. Like we were supposed to go to Tasmania on I think the 14th of March.
Right.
And it got canceled, of course. And then most of our shows have been postponed.
That was at a time though when it wasn't completely shut down. It was just starting. People were just starting to think that things should be shut down, and we were like,
yeah, should we stay or should we go?
Are we going to go to Tasmania? And then it was 3 days later or 2 days later where they said, oh, you're going to 2 weeks to come back in, 2 weeks to go out, and there was all this other stuff. So we made the right call. We were very worried about doing that.
And disappointed.
Disappointed because we planned to go to Tasmania for like a year, and then for a project we're going to hopefully still be able to work on. But anyways, since then we've been home, and it's been, I guess because so much has been canceled and so much has been put off, it's been super relaxing in a way. I hate to say it. We're super privileged because we're out here in the middle of nowhere, and BC hasn't been hard hit by the virus, so that there have been no non-essential services shut down. A lot of businesses closed, like we closed our studio because people were uncomfortable and people wanted to not be.
Although our main studio manager is working from home, so
right.
It's been perfect for him.
So that worked out.
And it's been nice. Our daughter's not at school, so I can sleep in.
And she's so much happier not being at school.
I know. I think that children are the winners in this situation.
Well, sometimes, you know,
sometimes,
if they have a nice environment, yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And those of us who are able to provide that are, I feel we're lucky.
Yeah, it's been more relaxing, definitely, but in ways that helps with creativity to a certain extent.
And yeah, that actually takes us to my next question. Is like, did this feel like a downtime? And has it been a creative time for you, or has it been a productive thinking time for you?
Well, I don't know. I think we might have slightly different points of view, because during this time, we sort of dropped the piece that we were both working on as collaborators, because there wasn't the pressure to finish it for the fall. And we kind of shifted into things that, you know, we might have been working on before, or we might think about working on, and then George started researching different things, and then I started playing in different things. So it, I think it's fed a certain different type of creativity. It's the kind where, oh yeah, I got to do the gardening for, you know, a couple hours here, and then you go into the studio and play. You don't have the pressure like, okay, well, let's get the assistants working on this part, and then we got to do this, and, you know, we got to do this.
Yeah, it's changed, I think, a lot. I mean, I think we've come up with, I mean, normally, I think we do need to have intense deadlines to really get a lot of work done. Mm-hmm. And so, especially me, maybe me more than you, because you're more self-motivated. I need the external pressure. And so I think we've got a lot of interesting ideas going. We get to talk more than we normally do this way, because we see each other a lot more. Normally we're both kind of focused on getting our part of a project done. And so, I mean, we see each other every day, probably more than most people see their spouse, but this time it seems like it's really, we've seen a lot of each other. So we've had a lot more of those conversations about artworks and what's the next piece, and where the piece that we were working on is going to go. We have a lot more time to think about it, because basically our next show, well, that show was our gallery show in New York, which would have been in November. So that's a pretty close trajectory from March to November. We were making a new piece for that show, and so we felt super intense and pressurized about getting it done, and it was on our timeline. That's our complete focus. And then when COVID happened, our gallery shut down, and they not shut down, but just they closed for the time. And then they're moving all their shows back. So our show's been moved actually a year from when it was. Mm-hmm. So that was like this depressurizing moment. And it's like, oh, we have a year. So all of a sudden it took all the pressure off, but it also in some ways took the motivation off. But we've had a lot of time now to think about it, and maybe it's going to change because of that.
In ways it's good, I think, to have more time, because you're quite often your first ideas of how you're presenting something or working on something aren't necessarily the best. So then with a little bit of gestation, you can sort of go, oh, well, that might be better for this sort of thing. So we're sort of just slowly sort of picking at it. It's like picking away at it, and then we can be able to think about it. I'm always amazed how much time it takes to develop a project in your head. Like when we have first ideas, and then it's very tricky to know about the time. Some projects you have too much time, and then other projects you don't have enough. So it's this balance that you need a certain amount of time for the gestation, to get rid of all the bad ideas and get rid of the more direct things, and have it sit and see the connections come to you. It's almost like you become a magnet and have things come in. And
but we've been thinking a lot about as well.
So we've had that
because of COVID, and our work. A lot of our work is about people touch things and they put headphones on, so we're thinking about, well, what's going to happen in the new art world? You know, are people, every time they go near one of our organ pieces, are they going to have to, suit up with a hazmat suit, or are they, there's going to be a hand cleanser everywhere, and headphones, are people going to be crazy about cleaning the headphones and stuff like that? And so how's that going to affect our work? And so then we were also thinking about works we could do during this time. So we actually started developing a piece. We're thinking, well, we're in this incredible environment. We have a river that's flooding up on the banks outside here. And we were going canoeing a lot at that point. So we started developing a piece we thought for the internet so that people could actually experience nature. Like we were recording with binaural audio and shooting this video. But basically, it's taken us so long to get that piece done. COVID's going to be long over before we get it on the internet. So
just to show the process how we work, we went out first with a pretty good camera, and the way the river works, and it's risen so that all the trees are underwater. So then all the leaves are creating all this reflection on the river, and our good camera couldn't handle it.
Couldn't handle it. The Kodak couldn't handle it.
Yeah, it started going all weird digitally. So then we tried reshooting with another camera, and it didn't work. So then we rented a camera, this $3,000 camera, and we've got it in a tippy canoe. We didn't tell the rental people.
I did. I told them I'm taking it out in the canoe. They said, "Well, you bought it." Yeah.
And even the 4K one, it didn't work. So then we rented a 6K, and we finally got some footage we liked, but then it wasn't, maybe it wasn't the sun wasn't as right as, some of the other. It's so frustrating in ways making pieces, but you still have this drive to get it done, and you see this vision of what you want. And then George having to go out and record at 4 a.m. to get some audio that didn't have traffic noise on it and stuff like that. I
still haven't listened to that, but yeah, we're sick of canoeing now. So.
Well, I do hope that piece will be available before. I don't know what timeline we're on with COVID, but I was wondering when you said that not much has changed, you kind of in your everyday life, but at the same time, what's happening is changing the way you are making your work. Yeah. And I got caught in the middle of a deadline that keeps kind of getting pushed back, and I feel that my own thinking around how I'm metabolizing this or internalizing the situation and the way it's informing the way I'm thinking is quite interesting. And I was wondering, how is that so? Not just that, because I'm also like planning an exhibition that's supposed to open this fall, and we are mitigating all those new realities of touching and what can you touch, what kind of experience with art can you have now. So, but beyond the physical aspect of the experience, how has the situation changed the way you're making your work?
Well, I think to me, I've thought a lot more about ideas of intimacy, because what's happening now is you can contact people through the Zoom, and we've had lots of Zoom meetings and, drinks with friends over FaceTime and stuff. But it's this idea of I really miss hugging my friends, and I miss seeing them in person and, like just having fun. But at the same time, in combination with this question about intimacy is this overwhelming sense of the news. Mm-hmm. And because the news has been just shocking and disturbing, especially the last couple of weeks, it makes you think about things, and it definitely does change your inner life. It's you have to watch your psychological state, and you have to watch how much of the news you're allowed to take in, because you don't have the resources that you don't normally do, I think, when our culture sort of can combine and you can go out and, talk and have a coffee with someone. So I think that George and I were both thinking about intimacy, and one of the things that I was working on in the studio was these little theaters where the little characters were sort of talking and creating a family and creating a community. And when I'm looking at it, some of the things I've made is very much about this connection. And our audio walks and our video walks, I think they do this whole thing, intimate thing. And so I think that's why George thought about this canoe ride, that you listen and you can sort of be there with someone as they're.
That was your idea. Sorry.
Can you write is my idea?
Sure, it was your idea.
We can never remember. Anyways,
Right.
it definitely, I think it is changing. And even though it's been fairly easy for us, and we're very lucky in that way, I think it's a very difficult time for psychologically for people.
For me, I mean, going back to the original question about making stuff, I mean, because of the pressure release, I haven't been focused maybe as much as I should be on the new pieces, but I've been just allowing myself to play a lot more than I normally would because I have this time, and so I have a bunch of guitars and I like to make sound stuff, and I have this synthesizer, and so I've played a lot with just doing things like that, and perhaps watching too much YouTube videos on products and doing a lot of research on different things. So spending my time watching too much Endeavor on well, iTunes, I guess we buy that from Apple, which is a pretty good detective series if anyone wants to watch that.
And we referenced in the introduction, and you mentioned the how walking is so much part of the work when you conceive it, and your walks are very well known in the art world. And the experience is kind of a very individual one when you put the headset on. And I feel like we're now in this world, as you mentioned, where we're all connected with our headsets, but then they're actually connecting us rather than taking us inside this imaginary space. So have you been walking much yourself during those last few months?
Walking?
Walking, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Janet walks.
Yeah, almost every day, and I do have walking buddies, which are nice because where we can walk here, you can actually be 6 feet apart, and sometimes we even walk the horses. You know, take the horses for a walk and stuff like that instead of riding them. But yeah, I think walking is a great meditation. And being in nature is a really great way to soothe your soul. So it's, I think that two things that keep me mentally okay is, well, except for my family, two things are playing in the studio, because you get into a state where your mind is able to heal itself, and as well as walking. Walking is that same kind of, as well as, I'm part of a choir, so we've been singing, doing Zoom kind of meetings and stuff like that. But also singing is also beneficial and things like that. But I think everything you do contributes to your art practice, and it makes you think about, you know, what you do. And I think with George playing the studio, he's making some great soundscapes and some great music happening here, and it's something that I would never do, right? But I love that he's doing it because I love experiencing it. You know? So we're very lucky to have each other to be working with. It would be much harder to be a single artist in their studio.
Or be in the city. We think about our friends stuck in the city or in New York, and how difficult that would be to be in a single apartment.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how people are doing it or surviving. I mean, Jan's talking about mental health issues. It must be so difficult for people. And I mean, even out here, we still feel the kind of pressure of the whole world situation. But if you're in the city, I don't know, it must be a very different thing. I had something to say, but I can't remember what I was going to say.
Reading is also a great way to escape. And not often do you have time to read.
Right. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot more time.
More time to read.
I don't walk so much right now because my favorite trails are all underwater. So I like to walk. These trails here are all soaking. I mean, there's 6 feet of water over them right now. So, and Janet walks the roads more than I do. I don't really like walking on the roads. I like being in the bush more. And it's very mosquito-y right now. So
yeah, they've started.
The mosquitoes are here, unfortunately.
Nature keeps on doing its usual thing, right, at this time of the year. So you said reading, and I was thinking when you said about how people in the city try to negotiate this when they don't have access to nature, and I think that probably reading has been a savior for a lot of us during those days. So what have you been reading?
Janet reads more than I do. I've just read this, well, I did read all the 20 books in the Master and Commander series by Patrick O'Brian, which is this fantastic historical novels about ships and sea, which I love, and it takes you away.
It's actually really awful when George gets involved in a reading in a series like that, because you don't see him. He's sitting with a book constantly for days.
It's escapist. It's been bad ever since I was a kid. I'd start a book and I'd have to finish it. So I'd stay up all night when I was 12 to finish a book. And, it's the same. It hasn't changed much. So sometimes I just don't start books because I'm like, I don't have the time. I have to keep working. I don't have 2 days to blow in a book. But
and then the Chinese writer you were reading.
Yeah,
I read the first book of his. But...
The Three Body Problem is that the series or is that the first book?
That's the first book in the series.
Okay,
and then The Dark Forest is the second.
And his name is Liu Cixin. I'm not saying that correctly. But I looked it up on the internet beforehand just so I can see and it says you won't be able to pronounce it properly. So,
but don't even try.
We read quite differently, and I think it's very interesting because it's very reflective of also how we work on art. When George starts a project, he likes to keep finishing it on there. And then I go into the studio, and one day I might be painting, and the other day I might be doing little sculptures, and then the other, I don't know what I'm going to do until I get in the studio. When we're not working on a project, until we get in the studio, and then I feel like doing something, and then I'm going, I should be doing this, but no, I feel like doing this. So I spent like 2 weeks oil painting. And
yeah, fantastic. Good paintings.
But it's the same way as with reading books, because I usually have at least 5 books on the go at once.
Mm-hmm.
And,
so what are those right now?
Oh my goodness. I finished the last one of Samantha Swebling. I don't know if you know her, but it was called, was it Little Eyes or something like that? She's really great writer. Her short story book, I can't remember what it's called, but anyways, she's written 3 books. She's a young, Argentinian writer. Mm-hmm. So her stuff is very peculiar and weird. I like that about writers. I just finished Wiebke von Karlsfeld's book, and she's a filmmaker, but she wrote her first novel. And she did a documentary on us years ago, so that's when we got to meet her. But she wrote her first novel, and it's really good. It's called Claremont. It was quite disturbing, but it's very interesting to me because I'm interested in writing myself, but I'm not a writer. I sort of write different scenes and see how they go together, more like poetry. But I read things like Clarice Lispector. I've got a book of hers always on the go, and there's a Conversations at 80 with Jorge Borges, and that's really good. Oh, and my favorite essay writer right now is Charles D'Ambrosio. Have you ever read him? It's a book's called Loitering, and just fantastic writing, like just really fantastic. And then Ocean Vuong, I'm not sure how to say his last name, but that is, I mean, he's a poet, but also I wrote this book recently that I just downloaded and sort of halfway through on Earth, where Briefly Gorgeous or something like that, I think it's called. I think his book is sold out actually in the physical. I had to order it from one place.
That's enough, I think.
Oh, no, please. Keep going.
And it's very interesting because I've been reading, I keep by the bathtub, this Isabel Allende, the stories of Eva Luna. And I came across one story, I think that is the best story I think I've read in a long time, or I love short stories, but it's called Secret Histories. And that's inspiring me now in a kind of a script thing that's going to go with the footage we shot with the canoe. So it's
beautiful.
It's really, to me, reading is really essential, and I really admire writers who can put words together that are so beautiful. Anyways,
well, yeah, it sounds like you've kept busy and inspired.
A great one too is Vox by I think is Nicholas Baker, I think it's called, and it's a book that I found on our bookshelf that I didn't even know. I must have bought 20 years ago. I'd never read, and it's just a conversation between two people about concepts of erotica. But it's like a woman he calls up, and then he's talking, but it's just sort of this kind of idea of bizarre erotica, but it's not really erotica. It's more about how we get connections through talking and through voice. So it's called Vox, V-O-X, and it's a really beautiful one.
I had no idea she was reading so many. That's why your mood swings on.
Yeah, it's true. I have to watch what I read because I can get super depressed if I read about, difficult book. Like I read, anyways, another one I read that I was so mad at the end. So I'm not even going to mention that one.
Bad ending by the author?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, don't mention it. Okay.
We have a few questions from our virtual audience. So I will read you the first one. Without the pressure of deadlines, have you found new thoughts for projects on subjects you haven't explored before?
I think we sort of answered it, didn't we?
Yeah, and I guess, we answered that in a certain way, I think. But also, I think what we're doing in a way, the ideas we're having right now, I'm not even going to bring up what they are, but they're revisiting sort of older ideas that have been on the back burner for a while, because when there's a lot of pressure, you're not being pushed necessarily, but somehow there's a path made for you in a way, I think. And right now the path has been completely, there's no path right now. So it opens up. So there's ideas that have been in the past that we had, and I think we're going to go with some of those ideas. So that's what's happened. I mean, I don't know if I guess we have somewhat new ideas, but it's interesting because in our work, there's always there's threads of different pieces. Like we do the walks, then we do the video walks. Then we do these kind of Baroque installations with sound, and then we do speaker pieces with sound, which are kind of austere sound installations, I guess you would call it. And then we did the cinema pieces with headphones that you go into. And so that's one that would sort of hit a dead end. And I think we're thinking of ways to maybe continue that, but in a simpler format without building a big sculpture of a cinema. So
my problem is I keep having too many ideas.
Yeah. I'm supposed to go do my yoga.
Oh.
But it's great because I'll start working on something and then be able to bring George in and go, what do you think? And then, I can tell if he's interested or whatever.
Well, the problem is you do have too many ideas.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, but we got to just work on one or two or three. So I end up being the editor. And then anyways, it's great.
Easy to get scattered. That's one thing I find. So how about another question?
Yes, there's another question, and it's actually a very good one. With the increase in audio work and podcasts and such, are you listening more?
Oh yeah. Actually, I've always listened to a lot of podcasts, but
I don't listen to any podcasts. So we're very different.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm listening more.
I listen to music a lot.
What's great right now, though, is that there's such an abundance of amazing things online that we're maybe going to be in a theater or like the Simon McMurtry, the binaural audio theater piece that called The Encounter.
Yeah, that was on for a week.
That was on for a week, and then there's films that are on for a week and things like that. So that's amazing to take part in.
But you listen to certain podcasts.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of CBC Ideas or The On Being or a bunch of different podcasts that I have.
I just have always listened to music, and it hasn't changed really. I may be listening to a bit more. I mean, that's why I love driving, is just being able to get in the car and listen to it. So I've been listening to, like, I love Godspeed You Black Emperor, this band from from Montreal. Who've been around for probably 20 years. And I love this new band I've been listening to, Better Oblivion Community Center. I had to write it down so I could, well, they're just kind of a pop alternative band, but
great title.
Yeah. That's Phoebe Bridgers is in that band.
Oh, okay.
So, and I love her work too. She's kind of a folk alternative pop singer, Phoebe Bridgers. But yeah, so I listen to all kinds of diverse things, and I love searching the internet for those kind of things. So find a lot of new music on SoundCloud and Bandcamp.
Okay.
Yeah. So
there's a question about technology and acknowledging that you've always embraced it in your work. And I think you've answered a little bit this question, but we'll see if something else comes out of it. With the immersion in Zoom, FaceTime, and I guess video mediums for communication, do you have any new insights into connecting with your audience?
That's a tough one.
Well, I have done more Instagram than I've ever done. I've had an account for like 15 years and only recently sort of started posting things the last 6 months. But I think we've thought about different things. I was trying to figure out some way that you could do something. There was connecting with a performance that I was involved in way back in 1992, where we set up interviews with people and we had conversations for 20 minutes, like very intimate conversations. And I thought that'd be great for Zoom, or for the internet at this time. But it's in ways I found that I wasn't actually equipped enough to have conversation. I would get a gallery in Calgary set this performance up. It was called Intimacies, and there were 3 other guys and myself, and I got booked a lot by men who came in and talked to me and then would tell me things that they weren't problematic, but they'd say that they'd never talked to anyone like this before. They'd never been talking so intimately, and it was a performance that was inspired by Linda Montano and what she did at the New Museum. And afterwards I realized that it's very difficult because I think a lot of our work connects with intimacy, but it's kind of a fast food connection when you're just talking to someone intimately for 20 minutes and you don't have the training in psychology to be able to direct people or help people, but there is that need all the time. So it's made me think a lot more about these kinds of approaches, and I wish some artists would do that. I don't think I'm equipped to do that. I think I am actually too delicate to do that, but I think it is the perfect medium for that sort of thing. So if someone wants to take that idea, I think it's a great idea.
So that was a performance that you did with Nelson Henricks, John Winnett, and Charles Cousins, right?
Yeah, in 1992.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it came out of a residency we did where we were all in the residency, and then at the end we felt that even though we had great times with these 20 people from all over the world, we really felt we hadn't, went to that next level. So we decided to set up conversations talking about erotica, actually. But and that was very interesting, but we had already been friends. That was a separate one. And that's what led us to this concept of working with a gallery, and we put ads in the newspaper, and then people would sign up, and people did sign up. We had office spaces and people really signed up. I was booked, pretty full on. And then it sort of informed, I think, some of the audio walks and the ideas of personal connection, but at the same time, I knew that it wasn't something that I could take on myself. Yeah.
A final question, and acknowledging our disembodied conversation and this virtual space. It's the theme of disembodiment has run through a lot of your work. The disembodied voice, the walks with no person present, the use of mannequins and human referencing machines. Do you feel that mid-COVID isolation, the idea of the disembodied has new resonance for people, for you, and I guess for people?
Is what? Sorry?
New
the idea of disembodiment has a new resonance in this context.
Right. Yeah, perhaps it's, I mean, there's so many things about this situation we're in, that we're living, that is so strange and makes us feel weird. Who knows? It's difficult. I long for real things now more than ever, you know, like, I mean, I've always been that way, I guess, with my work or our work, that I prefer a real installation to a video installation, just because I like three-dimensional tactile things. And I guess that's what, like Janet was talking about with hugging people, it's something we really miss. You miss, but you also miss being next to somebody and talking to them, and the eye contact that you would have instead of staring at a TV monitor or whatever, you know.
Or is the camera?
And didn't you say there was some study about that they did about eye contact and talking face to face, that
it's actually mentally really good for you. You know, it helps create some serotonin or something, and that.
And I'm a kind of a hermit normally anyways, but even I am feeling like I'd like to see some people right now. I'd like to have them face to face. And luckily we had a friend come out on the weekend. Brian Youngin was out here visiting us. He lives close by, which is fortunate for us to have someone close. And anyways, that was nice to have some time with people. And I've lost the question completely.
No, about disembodiment. How
you're answering it a different, yeah, you are answering it still, yeah. The disembodiment and our relationship with that, understanding of that.
It's interesting. We'll see what people, I don't know if the work will change, or, I mean, obviously everything that happens affects you and your work, changes you. So obviously the work will.
Yeah, like we produced Killing Machine, right? When the Gulf War was on and stuff like that, or the Abu Ghraib.
Yeah.
But one point though about the Zoom that made me think about is there is the same kind of safety situation that I get, or we get from when I produce the when I produce the video walks and audio walks, and my voice is right there behind you. There's a safety situation for me. I can have kind of a relationship with someone, but it's a surrogate relationship through media. And I think in ways it gives people freedom to be able to have a connection. And then some people are much more, you know, I found that it's almost a shock when you see someone in a person, and then you have to, it's a different thing. It's really, so it's made me think about that sense of, you know, there might be a piece come out of this idea of what is the physical, because a lot of our work functions, I mean, it investigates questions of how we view reality and the rhetoric around reality and perception. And so that, you know, you might have layers of one recording on top of another, and where is that recording in space to this recording in space to this time, and then this one is past and this one is further past, and then we're in present and things like that. So in ways you can do the same thing with people distance. Like right now, you know, people are getting us in our studio. It's a fairly nice connection. But, you know, if we meet in person, it's a totally different thing. So how can you work that in terms of a gallery situation? You know, you have the real, and then you have the less real. Is it less real, or is it, you know, it's a different thing? Anyways, all those sorts of questions, I'm sure there's theoretical people working on right now that is quite interesting.
Well, thank you. I think it at least for me, it felt very intimate, and I'm, you know, lucky enough to know you in person and connect with you through the now essential medium of Zoom. And I think we're going to stop here, but I would like, before we say goodbye, to thank you for your generosity and for making time to share with us what keeps you going those days. And I feel like maybe we should check in again in 3 months or 6 months and see how everything we said today is going to stand or not stand anymore, or maybe we'll be in a different place. But I think that talking to you today definitely gives me hope and inspiration for the days ahead. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
Well, you're very welcome. For the last 10 seconds, do you want to have a panoramic?
Sure. Please do show us your studio. Yeah.
Cut off if you disconnect this cable.
No, I'm not going to walk around. Just
okay.
Do a zoom so you can leave the cable, because it will cut.
Do a zoom on Zoom.
In a zoom. You can't zoom.
Can you still...
That's as far as you get.
Oh, yes, yes.
So you can see what I mean. It's kind of a messy place.
But it feels very comfortable.
Okay. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. Take care and talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. And thank you all for joining us. Goodbye.